Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. How do you use the information from this show to address issues that executives actually care about? TrustedSec is a global information security consulting firm built on cutting-edge attack simulation research that extends those insights to advisory services, including governance, risk, and compliance, PCI, virtual CISO, and MITRE ATT&CK framework assessments. TrustedSec helps you translate the types of zeros and ones that you care about to the types of zeros and ones that executives care about. Go to TrustedSec.com/Security Weekly. Learn how TrustedSec can become an extension of your team.
Major data security breaches continue to make headlines. Are you prepared? Standardizing your security framework will help you stay competitive, be a reliable business partner, and manage intellectual property, financials, and employee and customer information. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, offers the standards you need in one place through standard subscriptions, a cost-saving, fully customizable solution. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ANSI. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. Secure World Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference, March 27th and 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners save $100 off a full conference pass by visiting secureworldexpo.com and using the discount code Security Weekly. Also, we just released our 2019 Security Weekly 25 Index Survey. Please go to securityweekly.com and click the survey link to help us understand who's evaluating, using, or formerly used any of the Security Weekly 25 companies. The results will be summarized and presented back to all responders in a private webcast. All right, Paul, let's dig into the articles this week.
Let's do it.
All right, so we've had a couple weeks. We had RSA last week. So I picked out a set of articles for this week. There's probably a couple we'll go over the next couple weeks. But we were talking to Ben Carr on the last segment and CISOs, and we talked a little bit about the board. And so Harvard Business Review has this article about how to make sure your board sets a good example for your company. And this article was focused on the CEO, but I think valuable for CISOs or anybody who has to present to the board on kind of making sure you've got stuff kind of organized and ready to go. So I dug into this one a little bit. It was kind of fun. So the first one that I thought was good, and again, I think this applies to CISOs as well, is share expectations, agree on principles, and put them in writing. So that there's a plan. It's the plan of, if you're sitting at the board and you're the CISO and you're setting a plan for the year, make sure you kind of share those expectations, figure out what you're going to do, and then put it in action. And that helps you prepare and plan really for the rest of the year on how your communications with the board will be.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to have things in writing just so everyone knows, what the plan is, and literally everyone's on the same page, right? That's important.
Yeah, agreed. There's, obviously review them on an annual basis. Plans are going to change. Every year, you're going to set a new set of business goals. Those goals may change expectations at the board level. So those have to be reviewed and adjusted. There's a couple here that are very CEO specific, but it talks about performance reviews, annual board self-assessments, just some of those basic things that we kind of do at layers in the organization, but they're saying is do those at the board as well.
Right.
And make sure you're addressing kind of all the members on the board and making sure expectations and performance are set and evaluated. This one ties into our next article, which is I'd love to tie these articles together. After a breach, CISOs fall on their swords or play the role of scapegoat. We've seen lots of examples of this. They talk about Target and Uber and was it Expedia hack, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how you change out your CISO or a bunch of executives and kind of move forward. And what the article's talking about here is, look, you have to have a relationship with security. Security has to be tied in with the board. Security has to understand business objectives. And if they're going to be effective in mitigating a breach, they have to be a business partner with the rest of the executive team. They can't be the scapegoat or the guy that gets fired just because there's an event, because it's more than security. Can't sit in a bubble. It can't sit by itself. It has to be integrated in, and you've got to address it as a holistic company thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has to, as we always say, align with the business, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And if you've got your board set and security's part of that discussion, then you're working together through breaches. It's not
right. Yeah.
a scapegoat.
I completely agree. And we cover breaches all the time, right? And I don't want to do the name and shame game for the security departments in those organizations, because most of the time it's really not their fault. Usually it's some other systemic problem, right? And I think CISOs carry too much of the burden there. I think you're right, Matt. When it comes down to business decisions, they should be making those together. And when you're breached, we go, either we miss something, which is totally possible in today's day and age, right? Which you have to take that into consideration. And then the other thing is, did they accept the risk with the business leaders? So when you get breached, you said, look, like, we accepted this risk, and now it's time we accept the consequences of accepting that risk, and there's a breach, and let's make sure we can respond to it, right? There's always some type of security incident that's going to happen in the organizations. You're not going to prevent all of them. You have to have a plan for dealing with them. And I think firing people is the wrong thing. Even if it was a failure in their department, that's an opportunity to be even better and learn from your failures. And I would rather have a CISO as part of my organization that had been at companies that had been hacked and had to deal with that than not.
Yeah, because you're going to learn from those mistakes. Yeah. And hopefully you're putting plans in place to mitigate it in the future. Mm-hmm. And so those folks, they've been there. They've gone through that battle. So they know exactly some of the things they would change or do differently to protect mm-hmm. the organization.
For sure.
Yeah. I love this next article on cybersecurity is putting customer trust at the center of competition. Finally. And it talks about two major trends, right? It's talking about the trends of everybody's a software company now. Mm-hmm. As we move through this digital transformation, we're interacting with software, and then you have that expanse of people interacting with your software. And that now requires you to start to build trust as part of your story, because now I got to protect customer data, privacy, all these other things that we've been talking about for years. But it sounds like companies are really embracing the trust aspect of their solutions, and cybersecurity is playing a role in building that trust to protect these customers and these clients, whoever, in the interaction with other companies. And they talk about Apple in this article, mm-hmm. and in kind of the philosophies behind Apple and what Tim Cook has done to really try to build trust across the Apple environment, and how that has benefited Apple as a company.
Right.
So for those people out there, build trust in your products.
I think we have seen, and I think a few guests have pointed that out recently, that there has been a trend towards trust and it being part of the brands, especially of major companies. And we know major companies have very large security teams, and sometimes they're using that as part of their marketing for whatever the product is, right? I was talking to someone, and we were talking about the trust that you have in your financial institutions, right? I think that very heavily weighs in on, if you're going to do some kind of stock or investment transaction, you have to have a certain degree of trust And that involves security. So they have to reassure their customers that your account and your transactions will be secure. Otherwise, we're going to go take our investments in transactions to a different company. Matt and I were just evaluating this specific example, and security definitely plays into it, right? If they don't, at the very basic, require some kind of login secure, authentication type of security, I mean, they're out, right? So
yeah, I mean, I want to see two-factor authentication on my bank accounts.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of banking mobile apps yet. I really don't trust them yet. I haven't seen enough there to really trust them. So I'm like, look, I'm just going to interact with my banking environment, two-factor authentication. It forces me to put it in the second token. Then I know it's secure. But trust it's beyond that too, Paul. I mean, we've talked about trust internally and building trust with our analytics, the decisions we're going to make. That eventually enables things around automation. There's a trust component there for any of the security companies that are out there thinking about automation and level of trust. We've seen companies like Microsoft be very transparent over the last number of years with vulnerabilities and patches that have built broader trust with the Microsoft ecosystem and environment over the years. I mean, so you've seen it in a lot of different places. That's going to allow these companies to continue to thrive and grow as they build those relationships with their customers, whether you're a vendor to a set of companies or whether you're somebody like Apple who's providing, mobile devices and lots of services to a broad customer base. I had to bring this article and this next one because this was last night for me. 5 simple things to do every Sunday night to prepare for the weekend. For the week ahead. And this is where I get in trouble, right? We were at RSA all last week. Crazy week. You're just buried when you get back. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I have 2 shows today. I got to do prep.
Right.
And I use Sundays as a way to prepare for the week ahead. Normally, I would do show prep on Fridays and only a few tweaks on a Monday morning, for example. But this Sunday was a little more work to get ready because we were because with RSA last week. But it's just some good tips. It talks about, getting kind of what'd you already finish? Good. You know what you got done last week. That's kind of a no-brainer. But it's really about organizing what do you have to do for the week ahead and kind of know the logical order things have to be done. For me, it's this show. BSW is the first big thing I have to prep for Mondays. And so I want to make sure I have that one done. And then if we're doing another show or I'm co-hosting on another show, that's kind of secondary. And then all the other activities. So very important to kind of get my stuff organized for the week. But it talks about input, not output. It's not saying do a bunch of work on Sunday. Sometimes it's just saying, look around, understand all the things you have to do. You don't have to work on a Sunday. That's where I think my wife gets most upset with me is when I spend too much time working on a Sunday. It's supposed to be more family time on Sunday, but taking those inputs and just making sure you're prepared for the week is what I took out of this article. And I do it a lot just because of the way our Mondays always line up.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the preparation can happen in any, so I use like my time on flight and in between flights to do some of the prep for this week. Again, knowing like when you've been traveling and you're out, especially activity we generated at RSA, I was like in the airport, you saw it in between flights. I was like, we need to have meetings, right? And I was scheduling the meetings for the upcoming week, knowing what we had on our plate for that week. So yeah, getting ahead and planning like that is super, super helpful.
Plus, you also told me all the people you didn't get to that I had to follow up on Thursday.
Yes,
I went
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
almost Friday morning by the time I left San Francisco.
Right. Yeah. Just setting expectations and, having a plan for when you get back, especially if you've been busy at a conference like we have, just, talking to the people that work for you or work with you and letting them know what the plan is really important. And setting the priority too. Matt and I had a lot of conversations I had a lot of ideas coming off of RSA, just, creative spark that happens when you go to a conference. What's the most important thing, right? Like, let's pick one thing. And I think we talked about a Warren Buffett article that said that, right?
Yep.
And that was kind of the basis of our conversation. Actually, I was driving in the car on Friday to go on vacation with my family. And I was like, man, I got a lot of ideas, but I think the one thing to think about this weekend, if this is our one thing, this is what we should do. So
yeah, there was another article I almost threw in here because it's similar to that article we did, which is saying no.
Yeah.
The ability to say no. I think the other one is Steve Jobs says saying no to 1,000 things drives innovation, right?
Yep.
Because sometimes you get distracted by all the other things. But yeah, you boiled it down to, if we can do one thing, this is the one thing after RSA. So yeah, that's where our focus will be, not the other 10 or so ideas that came out of last week.
Well, I earned the nickname the salad shooter for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, you were shooting it well on Friday.
Oh, yeah. I was full of ideas. Some of them might actually be good, right?
Yeah, there might be some good ones. Yeah. This next article, this is a podcast. I listened to about half of this podcast. It's about critical feedback, about receiving feedback and giving feedback. And I'm really bad at receiving critical feedback, so I should listen to the rest of this podcast. But I want to listen. Anybody who struggles with kind of how to provide feedback to their employees, this is a really good podcast to listen to. They also give you some external links to some other articles and blogs about this. I think it's too hard to get into some of the details in this, but anybody who's wanting to learn a better way to provide feedback to their employees, it was a really good listen, and I think there's some really good resources in here for people to help with that.
Yeah, I think always balancing positive and negative feedback is a strategy that I've used, right? So you tell people where, like, you're doing really good here, and then in this other area, here's where we can get better. It's always a balance. You never want to go in 100% with like nitpicking, because then it feels like you're nitpicking. If it's 100% like negative feedback, not that negative feedback, it's the wrong term for it, right? But if you're like in a corrective kind of mode, having just that, I think, is kind of, it ends up feeling like nitpicking. So you have to have positive and negative to tell people, I think, give them good direction, right? Keep doing this. This is awesome, and then this. Here's some ways to improve here, right?
Yeah, and the first half of the podcast talks about feedback as part of performance evaluations, expectations around promotion and raises, and how to balance that, because employees are looking for a way to advance their career. You might have very good feedback in certain areas, but other things you want to see them improve before they get promoted. And it talks about those balances and how to address those. And I thought that was really good, because a lot of us, in the corporate world, are going through performance evaluations. You want to get a raise, but then you've got all this feedback, and it's trying to balance how to effectively receive it, but also give it at the same time, because sometimes it's a two-way street.
Right.
Yeah. Next one, to have a happier home life, treat it a little more like work. It's a great article. My career has been a lot of travel, and it's hard sometimes when you're on the road a lot to balance work and home. It gets difficult, right? You've got, your kids are in school, they have activities, your wife's been home taking care of things for the week. In my situation, this article is actually the reverse of that, by the way. She travels, and he was the stay-at-home dad. And you're gone, and you come home, and you're behind in work, but you're also behind at home. Lots of honey-do lists and all these things that have to get done. And what I thought was really good about this article is you take some of the things you do at work, things around organization and communication, apply those at home, and it will actually help create a better home life. And this is something Lauren and I have had to learn over the years. In the early days of traveling, when I was at Qualys and RSA, Tenable, lots of travel, and you had to kind of figure out that balance of, all right, you get home, who's doing what, she needs a break. It takes a while to figure that out, but if you can figure that out, it'll make things so much easier at home. Something I've experienced over the years. So it's a good read. Some good tips in here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting your home life and your career balance, and you apply strategies from both. I think to both situations, right? I mean, Matt, some of our listeners know too. I got a lot going on at home, right? Lots of kids and
Yeah.
dogs running around, so we have to be like a well-oiled machine. And sometimes I tell my wife that I'm like, sometimes we just need more resources. I'm not saying that's the answer every time, right? Sometimes we just got to make sure that, I mean, we both work, so like stuff's got to get done, and we have to rely on other people to do that. And it's funny you put the story here, because I was just telling my wife, like, we need to motivate the people that work for us just like you would if you ran a business in security, as an example, right? So we need to make sure that they're properly motivated, compensated, they feel good about their jobs, like the whole thing, because we depend on those people. And we haven't really put much effort into managing some of the people that help us out, right? So
Yeah. In outsourcing, right?
yeah.
You knew you were getting a snowstorm when you left for RSA, so you outsourced to make sure somebody was going to be there to get the driveway clear for your wife, right?
I got like 3 people in my phone that I can text, right? And like the first one to get back and commit, like, you got it, dude. Forwarded that to my wife. I'm like, you're all set. And he did. He came and did the snow blowing. And that was because it's weird that there was a big storm, in this time of year. I guess not so weird. We have gotten them, but contingency planning is certainly one of those things. If they're not working for you all the time, having someone to pick up those extra resources. We've done that here at Security Weekly, right? When we got overwhelmed with IT a couple of times, I called my friend who does a computer repair shop. It's really good with IT stuff, Linux, Windows, and all the hardware. I'm like, dude, you got to come build some systems, right? It's a short-term contract, comes in, gets you to the next place. And then that's a contingency plan when you're resource constrained. Having those resources lined up in both work and personal is a huge help, especially when you travel, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, the things we learn. My wife also knows that if she's got something for me to do with the kids, it's got to be on my calendar.
Yeah.
Because if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. I mean, that's the kind of things I'm talking about. Is I run my home schedule just like I would my work schedule.
And work schedule's the same way,
it's
right?
It's a blue calendar item instead of a pink one or whatever that default color is for Security Weekly. But if it's not there, I don't realize I got to do something like take Brendan to baseball or whatever, right? So I operate those the exact same way.
Absolutely.
Next article, 6 reasons your home office is better than your company office.
Really?
Well, I mean, sometimes, right? Look, I am more efficient at home. Just for me, I just...
Well, in the article, Matt, they have a pug, and I have 4 pugs. So, I mean, that's a good thing. They're pretty cool. I take them to work sometimes too. So
that's true. But I mean, I can focus better. I can be more efficient at home. I can, but there are downsides to being at home in a home office. I mean, that's why I come into studio at least once a month, because working with the rest of the team in person, continuing to build the personal relationships, those are some of the downsides of working at home.
Well,
I get the full bar.
A lot of variables, Matt, when you work at home. So I'll give you an example.
Oh, yeah.
When you go back from RSA, a lot of us work from home because you're tired from your trip. You got a lot of things to catch up on, right? I mean, and that's been pretty standard. Anytime, especially for us, for us here in Rhode Island, like we had to fly all the way across country, right? So when you get home, a lot of people work from home, and that's fine. And I was on Friday morning, and I was watching my 2-year-old, and I told my wife, I'm like, that went really well. Like, I was able to like work and do all my stuff, and he was chilling out, and if he needed something, I got it, and like it was good. But anyone that has had or has a 2-year-old at home knows the amount of variability there is in there, because I was doing the same thing on Sunday, trying to get some house stuff done because we're having a few people over, and it was the opposite. Like, he was not cooperating. He was like, no, you need to sit with me. We need to watch a movie. And we did when we watched Star Wars, but none of the house stuff got done. And so those working at home really presents a lot more variables, in my opinion, than working from the office. And you just have to be aware of that.
True. And the one thing that was missing in this article is I can't get cigars at home, so I have to come into the studio to get my cigars.
True. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it is, work environments differ. I wanted that in my work environment, so we worked it in here. Which is good.
Well, I have a bar in both places. So I have a fully stocked bar at home and at work. So that one transcends.
Right.
Regardless. But it's the cigars I miss when I'm not in the studio.
Told you got to build a cigar room.
Next house.
Then we can broadcast from it. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll work on that one in the next house. Last article for this week. I like to bring in some of the other side, the economic side of this. Cloud economy supports 2.15 million jobs and counting. We talk about this a lot, about cloud computing, the growth of cloud computing. It gets into some very interesting stats on 214 billion to the GDP, 2.15 million jobs. This is where I think we'll continue to see some interesting growth, but also some interesting shortages with good cloud skill sets. And this is something that I know we talk about different skill gaps, but this is one very growing area that I think we're going to continue to see a lot of focus on, and will also drive some very interesting security solutions around as more and more stuff moves into the cloud. So great for a growth perspective, maybe not so good from a skill set perspective.
Yeah, because one of the things I realized recently was that the cloud providers can add so much capability so quickly now because of the infrastructure that they've built. Even when I talk to experts in a particular area and I talk about a new cloud service that's in that area, it's a mix. If they haven't messed around with it, they're like, yeah, I don't. Fargate, I haven't deployed an app in it yet, right? But Lambda, they're like, yes, I have. So while cloud, I think, is way too of the wrong term, it's too far encompassing. You have to find experts in certain areas of cloud, and now there's at least 3 different major, maybe more, right? If you include some of the other ones that do security, right? I mean, there's obviously Amazon and Azure and Google Cloud, but now there's other cloud platforms, and all of them have their different products. So it's created in a gigantic skills gap that's now highly specialized and not just cloud expert, right?
Yeah, and they're building a lot more services. When we talk cloud in the early days, it was infrastructure as a service. I take my server from my data center that was virtualized, and I moved it to infrastructure as a service.
Right.
Now we're talking about platform as a service, Lambda, Fargate, these things that are broader platforms that are building out all these services. And Amazon's going crazy with all the different things that they offer. I mean, they're competing with some security companies in solutions they're building. They're building out a lot of new higher end services to go after new emerging areas like industrial IoT and edge computing. And so, yeah, keeping up with all the things that these cloud providers are launching it's hard enough in itself, let alone finding people who know how to use this stuff.
Agree.
Yeah. So that was my wrap for this week, Paul.
Sweet. I liked it. Good stuff.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.